So we're gonna make this large. Oh, the camera is muted.
Let's turn it on.
Yes. Do I do it right now?
I'll. It's recording and streaming is everything already.
Everything now is done.
Okay.
Let me know if you need anything.
Okay. Right. Use this as well.
Yes. So basically, this is for the ears.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Is this better now? Yes. Oh, even louder. Okay, that's good. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Jazakumullah khair for having me. It's a real honor to be here. Yes. Okay. So Bismillah. The topic for tonight, inshallah, why are young men struggling today? So hopefully this is easy to answer because I can just consider myself a young man and say from my experience. So I'm just basically going to be telling you what I'm going through. So this is going to be a therapy session for me and all of you are therapists. Okay, this is now. All right, so basically we're going to try to cover a few points. Okay, we're going to identify the problem, take a look at some modern considerations, Islamic contributions to the problem, or to the solution, I should say, and then the summary and conclusion. If at any point something is unclear or you have a question or anything comes up, like feel free to just interrupt and then we can have a conversation. I'll also leave time at the end for question and answer, so we can do it both ways. Anything will be fine, inshallah. All right, so the introduction. So as we know, especially in the times that we're living in today, the life of a young man is full of lots of challenges, but also responsibilities. And a lot of young men are struggling to keep up with the way that the world is framed and paced today. So a lot of expectations are placed on young men, and a lot of restrictions are placed on young men. And often without guidance, they don't know what to do and what not to do. And so they'll take on role models and they'll take on ideas and behaviors from people who they assume to be an authority on the subject. So if they have an idea in their mind of what it means to be successful, and they see someone meet that criteria of success, it makes sense then to follow that individual. And so this is, especially in the time that we're living in today, a very dangerous path. because it's going to allow two things really to happen. The first is that the young men themselves are defining what it means to be successful. And the second is that there's an unrestricted access that they have to find similar-minded people, ideas, influencers, celebrities, so on and so forth. And so the culture that we're in promotes this idea of the self being the authority. And so the idea that someone has for themselves, they will find an answer that aligns with that person's mentality, regardless of what that mentality is. So if I define success for me to be wealth, I will find people who are wealthy. If I find success for me to be having a lot of relationships, I will find someone who meets that criteria. If I define success to be someone who is extremely well educated, I'm going to find that. If I'm going to define success as someone who's well spoken, I'm going to find that. So whatever I define for success, I will find an example of that definition of success and I will follow that person. So what that's doing in the psyche of a young man is it is giving him the ammunition and it's giving him the authority to be his own caretaker, to be his own development, to be his own process and progress to growth. Does that make sense? All right. So of course, we're living in a time when there's lots of mental health issues, but there's also a lot of financial issues. And both go hand in hand. We're not saying they're exclusive, right? The ones that we're going to focus on today are 5: motivation, education, parenting, technology, and spirituality. So these are going to be the 5 struggles. However in depth or however brief they're going to be, we're going to try to get through these 5 today, inshallah. All right, so I just want you guys to see what's on the screen and see if this seems relatable. So the example that I put is my son, okay? So I'm not necessarily saying that your sons are problems, okay? Don't come chasing me with chuckle afterwards, right? This is just an example, okay? So think about my son as a young male in your community, and then just, that's who I'm referring to. So think about young men, and then we're using my son specifically is because we should feel responsibility for all of the members of our community, all of the youth in our community. And so we're putting a little bit of onus on ourselves, but if it becomes a little too uncomfortable to make it this personal, then it's okay to not make it that personal. But if you're okay with going to this extent that yes, it actually is my son, then by all means, go ahead and do that. So go ahead and just read some of these. I'll read them out loud as well. My son spends most of his time playing video games or watching TV. My son doesn't listen to me when I tell him what to do. But when I tell him to do something that is good for him, that I know is good for him. My son doesn't take responsibility for his things, his room, his assignments, so on. My son responds with flat affect. How was school today? Good. What did you learn? Stuff. How's the game? Fun. Okay? And doesn't talk to me as much as I would like. Maybe the way that I used to talk to my dad, or the way that I used to talk to my mom, or the way that I see my son interact with other people. Why is it that when you're with your friends, you're like this and like that and like this, but when you talk to me, it's okay, thanks, bye. My son is on the internet or social media and I don't know what he's doing. Like specifically. Oh yeah, you know, he's on his phone. Oh, he's on social media. But I don't know what he's doing on those platforms, what he's doing on his phone. Okay, so it's gonna try my luck here. If none of these are relatable to anyone, we can just stop this right here and I can go. Any chance? No? Okay, we have to go through this. Okay, we're gonna go through this. All right. No? Okay. All right, so now we're gonna identify the problems. So when it comes to motivation, okay, one of the things that we need to think about specifically is video games. Okay. So video games have become a powerful force in the lives of young men, offering an alternate reality where they can explore their feelings and gain motivation. So don't think about video games from the same perspective that we've been thinking about video games in the past. Video games, let's shift away from the idea that they're just this fun thing that our young men are doing. But let's view video games for what they really are from this kind of psychological perspective, which is, this is where there's no flat affect. This is where you're getting emotional responses. This is where you're getting investment. This is where you're getting motivation. So this is how it was kind of for me, where I'm at my cousin's house and we're playing in like the TV room on the second floor, and every 10 minutes or so, some adult has to come upstairs to make sure a kid hasn't broken their arm because of how much screaming and yelling and fighting is going on, because two people are going back and forth in a game of 2K or FIFA. So why is there so much commotion? Why is there so much energy? Why is there so much output, emotional output that's happening where? In video games. So we need to start thinking about video games as being as this thing where feelings and emotions are expressed. And then think about what consequences that has for us on a daily life for young men. So if we accept this hypothesis, right, that video games are where the emotional and feeling investment is going, then compare that to the reality that young men are living in, where they go to school and school is boring, where they do chores and chores are boring, where they do homework and homework is boring, where they go and they do X, Y, Z thing, but all of those things compared to video games are what? Boring. And so how are you going to then expect the same investment, emotional investment, feeling response when they don't have that same environment that they can live in? So I would rather do and give emotional and feeling investments in a place where I can have fun and do it, where I'm immersed and do it, when I'm doing something I enjoy and I do it, as opposed to 4 times 4 squared x plus 2y equals. And that's boring. And so I'm not going to be as invested in that thing. Also, psychologically, what happens in video games is there's a rise of chemicals in the brain. Specifically what? Dopamine and serotonin. These are your happy chemicals, okay? These are the chemicals that make you feel good. So again, think about it in this way. When I'm playing video games, there's a surge of dopamine and serotonin that's rushing through my brain. So physiologically, I am training my body to be happy when I'm on this high. And this high only occurs when I am in control of this intense reality. So if I don't have control of this intense reality, my brain does not know to be happy. My brain doesn't respond the same way physiologically that this is a moment that I can be happy in, that I can be engaged in, that I can be invested in or motivated in. So again, we're just identifying a problem. Okay, we can argue about video games, that's fine. Okay, we're just perhaps exposing ourselves to a new perspective on these things. So motivation tied to things like video games. What about the education system? The education system is training for what? financial success, okay, or material success, right? So we're learning the things that are going to help us secure money and secure good jobs. So this is very interesting how it happened. When you bring in a little bit of history and a little bit of experience that we've had and pair it with the type of education that we're receiving today. So if you look at the immigrant generation that came in this huge influx between the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, the mindset that the immigrant community is coming in with is really a survival mode instinct. Because where are they coming from is a very important question. They're usually coming from, especially if we focus on like the Indo-Pak subcontinent, and also if we look at post-Arab Spring Middle East. We're coming from very war-torn environments. There's a lot of civil war going on, there's a lot of independence wars going on, there's a lot of oppression, wide scale that's happening. And so as the generations before us are leaving these countries and coming to this Western world, the mindset that we're coming with is, I am escaping a place of danger and trying to secure for myself a sense of safety. And that safety in this new land, in this new world, is a safety that I can build through money. So just to be very clear, this is in no way placing blame. This is actually showing a lot of success that the generations before us had. That despite going through war, despite fleeing, despite running away, despite moving to a completely new country where you almost have no language capacity, and still building such a generation that you can afford a place like this. That you can build masjid after masjid after masjid and school after school after school. And half the people are driving Teslas and the other half are driving Porsches and Mercedes and Lexus. When it comes to a type of success, this community or this generation succeeded. So there's no blame being put on them. They did what they had to do. But now as we're shifting into this generation, if that mindset of all I need to do is secure financial stability is being passed down, and that is being paired with an education system that is promoting solely financial success. So we have two factors here. The mindset that's being passed down from our immigrant generation of, in order to be successful, you need to be secure financially. Paired with an education system that promotes financial and material success. When you overlap those two in our generation, what does that produce? More people, more youth, more kids who are solely driven now and now have the open opportunity, despite the consequences, of seeking out that financial success. And so what that does in consequence is it completely obliterates any sense of creativity and imagination in this new generation. Because the opportunity that I have educationally is for financial success. What my parents and grandparents are pushing me towards is financial success. And so the only thing I'm going to be focused towards now is how do I gain financial success? The easiest way is the way that makes the most money the quickest. And so we no longer have imagination. We no longer have creativity. We've lost those qualities that immigrant generation had. That immigrant generation said, I have no access to language. I have no access to resources. I have no access to security. I need to come up with something from my own imagination, my own creativity to provide success for my family. That thinking, just that step that occurs in the mind is no longer occurring because that thinking is being done by the educational system. And so our children are being trained like factory workers. So far, so good. Are we lining up? Hopefully, okay? Another factor, parents finding the right model for parenting, right? So parents are usually, and this is just from my experience, right? So I haven't worked with, like, for example, this community, so I don't know what this community teaches or preaches. But from my experience, the way that parents have engaged in parenting is on two extremes. I'm going to parent my child the way that my parents and my grandparents raised me. But now you're doing that without the familial support. You're doing that without the educational support. You're doing that in an environment for your children that's not the same as your environment was when your parents were doing it for you. It produces a type of entitlement. That's one end. The other end is what? I'm going to be the quote unquote cool parent, and I'm going to let my kid do whatever they want to do, and I'm going to go along with it and do it how they want to do it, and I'm just going to be their friend along the way. And so what this is basically asking is, when my kid needs me, they'll come to me, but I'm not actively going to be there for them, guiding them down the right path. So these are usually the two extremes that we see. But as we're going to see, there's going to be, inshallah, some Islamic solutions that we can begin to implement that will help us. Social media, okay? So this is another big thing. So social media is everywhere. It's literally on right now. This is on YouTube Live. So there's no escaping it, right? Your phone's in your pockets right now. There's something happening that's tracking your data or somewhat or the other that's doing something. And the companies know that you're spending your Friday night basically at this masjid, and you're going to see an ad for it tomorrow. I don't know what it's going to be, maybe socks, I don't know. Okay, something's happening, right? If you look to that corner, sorry to call them out, right? But, oh, nice, there's actually a Rubik's Cube, okay? But there's also phones, right? So social media is a constant distraction, right? One vibration and all of a sudden my train of thought is gone. I have to check to see what's going on my phone. I have to see what's going on in the world. I have to see what the newest update is. So what is happening with social media is it's creating a mind that is constantly distracted. A mind that cannot follow an argument. So in classical logic, okay, so we're taking a step back. In formal logic, the way that our minds are trained is through what's called a syllogism, okay, a syllogism. So we have two premises and a conclusion. Two premises and a conclusion. So if I say all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, that's usually the example. Let's say Muhammad, okay? Muhammad is a man. So all men are mortal, Muhammad is a man. What's the conclusion? Muhammad is mortal, okay? That's what's called a syllogism. You have two premises that lead to a conclusion. There are rules for it to make it work. A syllogism in formal logic is the natural way that our minds work. It's the what? The natural way that our minds work. So I don't have to go through premise one, premise two, and conclusion to give you an idea. If I simply tell you, right, that Muhammad is mortal, you should be able to figure out, because Muhammad is human and humans are mortal, yes, Muhammad is mortal. So there's a natural thinking process that occurs in our minds. What social media has done is it's distracted our mind. So now I'm going to give you premise one. This phone is blue. Then social media comes in and tells us that back door is actually open and there's someone walking in. Oh, actually, I think it's a little bit too cold outside today. My eye is itching. Is the camera correct? Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, awesome. This carpet is actually really pretty. Like, I really love how this carpet is designed, right? It really matches my phone. My carpet is the phone. What just happened? I said my phone is blue, flooded with distractions. The carpet matches my phone, and so therefore the phone is my carpet. What social media has done is it's distracted our minds from its natural thinking process. So I can no longer go from my phone is blue to it matches the carpet and conclude logically that my phone is not the carpet. I can't do that anymore. It's obvious. It's right in front of us. There's literally no reason for me to think that my phone and the carpet are the same thing. But because I started with one thing and there were 10 different distractions, and then I came back to the point that I was at in the beginning, my conclusion ends up being wrong. So the natural thinking process of our mind is gone. We don't have that quick thinking anymore. We don't have a natural form of thinking. And so social media has caused these distractions that this phone is no longer going to be a phone, but one day this phone is going to turn into the table, then it's going to turn to the carpet, then it's going to turn to the TV, and we're all going to be sitting there going, yeah, Mr. TV. And if you can understand what that means, you understand what that means. And all of us are sitting and clapping and saying, good job, you're brave. Distractions. Our minds can't think logically anymore. So what happens on social media? I mentioned this at the beginning, the influence of influencers and the emphasis on material gain, the need for instant gratification. So this is connected to video games as well. TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, Twitter has something now too, I don't know, Snapchat, whatever. I'm going to watch something for 10 seconds to a minute, be gratified by it, and move on to the next thing that my brain needs to be gratified. Then move on to the next, then move on to the next. Training my brain that if you want to focus, you need to have a kick of dopamine every 10 seconds to a minute. And if 2 minutes go by and my brain does not receive that stimulation, I need to do something else because this is not okay for me right now. I'm not happy with this. This is not satisfying me. So just the use of social media, purely the use of it. If it's an Islamic video, it's an Islamic video. If it's a reminder, it's a reminder. If it's, I'm sorry to say this, but like a 12-year-old dancing without clothes on, it's a 12-year-old dancing without clothes on. That's what's on social media these days. If there's constantly these disgusting things that were popping into our minds, and these are the only things that I'm being satisfied with, you cannot even begin to ask me to sit down for 10 minutes and listen to a talk without being distracted, to open a book and read 10 pages, to try to memorize one line of the Quran, to try to focus just during Fajr prayer. I'm not Fajr, you might not even be awake. Maghrib prayer, something short. Asr prayer, you don't even have to do anything. You just got to stand there, you can't focus. We've lost the ability to maintain focus. And then, of course, the absence of spirituality that exists for young men today. So during this transitional age, especially for young men, once they arrive at the age of puberty up until about the age of 25, even before that, they can develop in a few different ways. And the ways that are highlighted for their development is either one, spiritual development, or sexual development. They can do both, sure. They can do one or they can do the other. Or they can do neither. But what is missing is spiritual development. Now, if I just ask the simple question, and if there's someone brave enough to answer, feel free to answer. What does it mean to develop spiritually? Yes. Closer to God. Wonderful. Beautiful answer. What does that mean? Constant awareness. Taqwa. Good. What does that mean? Okay, there. Now we're getting to something, right? Because we can throw around ideas, right? But now, what is spiritual development? That my actions are guided by what? That Allah is watching, right? They're guided by a sense of consciousness. That Allah is aware of everything that I'm doing, whether I'm here with my friends, by myself, in public, regardless. And the easiest way to do it is to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, because he always did only what was God conscious. Right? But we don't know how to get there. We don't know how to instill that in our kids. We don't know what it means to develop that. Does that mean I just pick up a book of hadith, read everything in the hadith, and just start implementing it? Does it mean that I always think, okay, Allah wants me to do this right now? Like, how do you know what Allah wants you to do? There's so many questions. Right? So how do we train our kids now to have that consciousness and have that awareness and act according to it? So how did we get here? Let's see. I think I have time. Yes, okay, okay, so how did we get here? So if we go back to 17th, 18th century Europe, there's this period called the Enlightenment. You guys aware of this, right? You guys hopefully. The Enlightenment is called the Enlightenment very deceptively. We think of the Enlightenment as this time, according to its name, where Europe was enlightened. But really what's happening in the Enlightenment is the model of success. The standard by which I do things is shifting from religious to empirical. That's what they call the Enlightenment. That the way that I operate, the fault line of what I define to be successful is no longer religious success. It's no longer spiritual success. Now it has become empirical success, rational success, success based on if I can test this and this is true and it happens over and over and over again, therefore I am successful. So philosophy rejected the notion that God was the originator of good and embraced that humans discovered their own standards of good. Because religion is no longer going to tell me what's good and bad. I am going to tell me what's good and bad. In our times, this has shifted even more, that I'm not only going to tell myself what's good and bad, whatever I do is good. And whatever I don't do is bad. That's how far we've come now. And it all started with the abandonment of religion and spirituality. So let's look at an example of this. Okay? Who's familiar with Galileo? Hopefully. Okay. So Galileo, what's like he go to jail for and all that stuff? Geocentrism. Good. Okay. So he debunks the idea that the Earth is at the center of the universe and that all of the planets and everything are revolving around the Earth, including the sun. So pre-Galileo, the focus is what? The Earth is the center and the universe revolves around me. Okay? Post-Galileo, post-Enlightenment, my perception of the universe is no longer Earth-centric. it becomes based off of empirical reality that the sun is at the center of the universe and the planets revolve around the sun. Progress, right? Progress. Because we're coming to realize what is reality through empirical means. So this is progress. Einstein comes, and what does he propose? The theory of relativity, right? The theory of relativity. So everything is actually relative to each other. And so now our model of the universe maintains this heliocentric paradigm, but now we incorporate the theory of relativity, that it doesn't mean that the sun is the center of the universe anymore. The sun is now the center of the solar system. But our solar system is relative to another, and relative to another, and we're in this galaxy, and there's other galaxies, and there's all of it is moving all at once. So our relative experience is that we're still. But out there, we're moving at millions of miles per hour. Light years. We don't even know how to conceive of that. It's so fast. And so now look what's happening. Our perception of the world around us, of the universe, has shifted, and it no longer places us at the focal point. It says that we are no longer important. Humans are an accident that occurred in this universe with no relevance, purely coincidental. Because the sun is the center of the universe. We're just a bunch of accidents here. This wasn't meant to happen. It's by chance. We exist by chance. So you are insignificant. You do not have a purpose. You do not have meaning in life. The sun is what's at the center. And as we continue to progress, our perception of the universe changes even further. That no, not even the sun. The sun is moving too, the solar system with it, and everything is relative. You have your experience, I have my experience. The sun has its experience, the earth has its experience. The Milky Way has its experience, the other galaxies have their experience. Everyone has their own experience in time and space, and everything is on its own, and there's no coordination and there's no relationship between anything. I'm one thing here, but I'm something else over there, and I'm something else over there, and I'm something else over there. So this is just an example of how our perception of the universe has caused us to not only lose purpose within ourselves, because now I don't have a purpose, I'm an accident, I wasn't meant to be here, but it has also created that I have no value and no relationship with you, or you, or you, or you, or you. And you have no relationship with me. Your experience is your experience. I can never share a part of that, and my experience is mine, and you're never going to share a part of that. So our perception of the universe is actually, we can see the consequences of it in our thinking, in the way that we view life, in the way that we view reality. And so, again, material success. Success for you at the expense of others, because your actions have no consequence for me. Your actions have no consequence for people living overseas. Your actions are completely removed from anything that anyone else is doing. So I don't care how my clothes were made. I just bought them. I don't care if they come from sweatshops. I don't care if they come from enslaved Muslims. I don't care if they come from oppressed workers in factories who are dying. I don't care if FIFA, or what is it called, the World Cup is causing millions of immigrant workers to die. I don't care if there's oppression that's happening as long as I'm entertained, because they don't matter in relation to me. It's me, and I have no consequence of my actions to you or to anyone else or anything else. So this philosophy is at the back of the education system that exists today. And this is how our kids are being trained. That at the expense of others, don't care what they think, don't care what happens, don't care about the consequences. They don't say it explicitly, they can't. Implicitly, it's being programmed into their minds. And so we see this in the STEM sciences specifically, right? How many people can you go to and receive from STEM sciences? Receive an interaction in which they care about your soul other than the part of you that is a product for them. Zero. Anything. You go to any company, any work, any job, how many people are being taught to think about your soul rather than the part of you that serves their material gain? Someone tell, teaching, what is teaching? You're a student that is providing my salary. Whether or not you learn, it's not my problem. I'm gonna pass you with the D+. I don't care if you learn the material, I just care if you pass. Go to the doctor. I don't care about how you're doing spiritually. I don't care about your holistic health. I'm going to prescribe you what I need to prescribe you so that I can make money and charge you for surgery, and your insurance, what's going to get me the most money. Mechanics, engineer, like the list goes on. It doesn't stop. Think of any profession. I'm not picking on one or the other. We've been trained to think about gaining product and material and not care about the individual behind that product and material. So what are some resources that we can provide? There's this book called Boys Adrift by Leonard Sachs, right? So again, this is a non-Muslim source, so he doesn't have our holistic perspective necessarily, okay? But he's arguing a few things. That boys specifically are falling behind in school and they are less likely to pursue higher education and meaningful careers. Boys are at a disadvantage for a few things. Lack of male role models. Lack of the ability to empathize with others. Lack of education suitable for their style of learning. And lack of emotional support from adults. So adults need to be more involved in the lives of their children and provide them with opportunities for growth and development. We'll quickly touch on this again. He also argues that there's different types of learning. Okay, different types of learning. He argues that boys learn more so through experience rather than through like a lecture. So it's easier to teach a boy something when their hands are involved, when their bodies are involved, rather than them sitting and absorbing information by listening, right? So sports, immersive activities, hands-on activities are going to teach boys more and better rather than just listening to a lecture or reading a book or something like that. Okay, we can skip this. Oh, let's just read this part right here. So there's over-medication, video game addiction, and the decline of male role models, and the crisis of masculinity. There's a problem with academic achievement, career preparation, personal development. Okay, let's look at this. Children aged 8 to 12 spend an average of 4 hours and 44 minutes per day on screen media, while children aged 13 to 18 spend an average of 7 hours and 22 minutes per day. Okay, this is in 2020. Also, 2020, 19.1 million children in the United States live in father-absent homes. And then 2021, 9% of children aged 2 to 7 were taking medications for ADHD. Right? ADHD is attention deficit disorder, right? It's either hyperactivity or lack of focus. The impact of technology and thinking. So another book, right? The Shallows by Nicholas Carr, right? He examines how technology changes the way that the brain works. So the heavy use of digital devices and internet has caused us, one, to become more distracted and less able to concentrate for extended periods of time. Our minds can no longer think in the same ways our predecessors did. Our ability to read, think, process, and memorize has deteriorated severely. So the first book was Boys Adrift, Leonard Sachs. Second book, The Shallows, Nicholas Carr. Next, we have Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. Okay, implications of mass media, particularly television, on the culture and society. Postman argues that television has created a culture of shallow thinking, distraction, and entertainment, which has led to a decline in our critical thinking skills and a decrease in our ability to communicate effectively. One of the main things to take away from this book is that the medium is the message. So what you learn is, where you learn and how you learn is what you are learning. The content of what you're learning is secondary. So it doesn't matter if I'm learning on my phone or on YouTube or through the TV or video game, whatever it may be. The platform through which I learn is what I am learning. The content is secondary. So I'm learning not what TikTok is teaching me, but I'm learning TikTok. I'm not learning what the podcast is teaching me, I'm learning podcast. I'm not learning what the TV is teaching me, I'm learning TV. Okay, we can explore this as well. Coddling the American mind, this now shifts a little bit more to college-aged young men and women, right? But this is now talking about overparenting and helicopter parenting. We mentioned this earlier as well, right? So the author suggests that adults should focus on teaching young people to be independent and resilient, right? This will help young people develop the skills they need to success in the modern world, right? And then this type of safetyism that they talk about in this book, Coddling the American Mind, is found not only with parents, but also in educational environments, particularly in college education. Okay, so next book is what? Coddling the American Mind. Okay, so let's quickly go through Islamic contributions. So are people familiar with this? It's attributed to Ali radiallahu anhu. Some say that it's a hadith. Play with them for the first 7 years of their life, teach them for the next 7 years, then advise them for the next 7 years after that, right? So, simple hadith, but very wise. So formal learning for children, according to this, if this is a hadith or it's a teaching of Ali radiallahu anhu, regardless, we're recognizing this as Islamic wisdom, okay? That formal learning for children does not begin until the age of 7. Meaning, the type of learning that children benefit from most is what? Learning that happens through play. So when you're playing with children, playing with toys, playing with books, playing whatever the child is engaged with, that is how they learn. So if the child is not engaging with things and they're sitting there on an iPad or a phone, what do you think they're learning? Probably nothing. Children learn through what? Play. They don't learn through hearing. They don't learn through seeing. They don't learn through the senses of hearing and seeing. Their brains aren't working in that way. They're going to learn with interaction. They're going to learn by using their hands through experience. Then formal education begins at 7, meaning this is formal education. Now my child, I'm going to sit them down and begin to teach. Okay, now I can actually teach my child. Who does this occur with? Does this mean you send your child to the masjid? Does this mean you put your child on Zoom? Does this mean you bring in a Qari Sahib from Pakistan? No, who is this age of 7? Parents. The parents are responsible for the formal teaching of the child at the age of 7. If the parents don't know this material, what are they going to teach? So before your child reaches 7, you need to know everything you need to teach them by the time they reach 7, because now it's your turn to teach them, not someone else's turn, your turn. So parents are the first teachers and they must know what to teach. This is classified as our Fard Ain sciences. So between the ages of 7 and 14, Children should have learned all of their farda'in sciences. How to pray, how to make wudu, how to clean themselves in the bathroom, how to fast, how to pay zakat, how to go to Hajj. All of those things need to be learned. This is domestic learning, learning that happens in the house. Then the next 7 years, right? This is 14 and onwards. Now, once my child has the foundation, they were learning through play. They were being taught formally by me. Now I can act in the role of advice. Now I will transition them into adulthood, right? So this goes directly against the idea of the modern conception of a teenager. The concept of a teenager is destroying our communities. It does not exist. In Islam, we have pre-puberty, post-puberty. No taklif. No sins, sin. There's no middle period where like, actually this person's a teenager, so we're not gonna hold them responsible for cursing. No, they've hit puberty, they are responsible for their sins now. They are writing down their books for the day of judgment now. This entire concept of a teenager is this modern idea that's related to the end of times and the Dajjalic system, and I would love to go into that. Maybe we can talk about it later. Right, the age of Horus, the age of Iris, the age of Isis. You guys know all that stuff? I mean, hopefully you're familiar with it. Okay, so this is where we're taught the fard kifaya things, the things of community learning. So I'm encouraging my child to contribute to society. I'm not training my child to go into education, learn and progress so that they can benefit themselves. I'm doing it so that they can benefit the community. So my child needs to think about educating themselves for the needs of the community, not the need of themselves. Because the community will support the individual needs, but I need to support the needs of the community. Also, we've come back to this idea, right? What is true education Islamically? I'll go through this quick. I know it's over time. True education is the transference of adab. Adab is, so you know a person is educated in Islam when they have good adab, when they have good mannerisms, when they know how to hold themselves appropriately, publicly and privately. It's not how much information I know or how many letters are after my name on a certificate hiding in my office. That's not education. Education is that I have adab. Because adab is what? Adab, yes, it translates to manners, but also there's a relationship of adab and literary proficiency. Literary proficiency. That an educated person is one who is literally proficient, and they have good manners as a product of that. So one of the reasons why children curse so much is because they don't know how to express themselves. And so they resort to cursing because they don't have a way of expressing what I'm feeling. And so they resort to curse words because that's the only thing that they can do. Or they resort to anger, or they resort to an outburst because they don't know how to express what they're feeling. So redefining what it means to be successful in educational terms, it's connected with adab. So you can send your kids to Islamic school, but if they're jumping up and down and running across the table and not behaving in school, they're not receiving an education. And that needs to start at home, and it needs to be promoted through the community. So we need to give young men practical skills, right? We have to have reading of physical books like the Quran, establish a learning environment at the home with the family members where the responsibility is on the child. That the child is going to lead once they reach puberty, and then there's the fifth debate on that, but Hanafi, so once they reach puberty, that they lead the prayer. If they haven't, then they're responsible for maybe making the dua. And they have the whole day to prepare the dua that they're going to recite after Maghrib. Do this in Ramadan. That today, it's this child's day to make dua at iftar time. And give them the whole day to prepare that dua and see what they come up with. It's your responsibility to make the dua before we eat. Giving our children responsibility. Right? And then restricting time online, restricting time with TV, video games, social media, not only restricting it, but knowing what's happening, specifically on their phones, because their feed is different than your feed. What they see is different than what you see. Every single user on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and Snapchat has a feed that is personalized for that individual based off of the data that that app collects. So if you're viewing Islamic videos on TikTok and then how to make, I don't know, shakshuka and stuff on your TikTok, that doesn't mean that's what your kid is seeing on their TikTok. Building resilience, right? وَالَّذِينَ تَبَوَّعُوا الدَّارَ وَالْإِيمَانَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ, right? So this ayah, right? What does it talk about? مِمَّا وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, that they prefer other people over themselves, even if they have preference, right? So teaching this to our children, what it means to give preference to other people and to build resilience when something bad happens to you. Also understanding the reality of tribulation, right? Westerners in general have a crisis, an internal and mental crisis when things happen across the world. Russia and Ukraine go to war, we need days off of work because I'm having a mental crisis. Earthquake happens, may Allah give all of them Jannah, I'm losing my faith. Why is it that Westerners are having these huge internal and mental and spiritual reactions when the people who are actually experiencing that earthquake are experiencing miracles? They're reading du'as, they're reading Quran, they're interacting with angels, miracles are happening over there. And we're here losing our faith because we don't understand what it means to go through tribulation. We don't understand what it means to feel sad. We don't understand what it means to feel emotions. Sadness is not a bad thing. You just have to know what to do. Anger is not a bad thing. You just need to know what to do. Hatred is not a bad thing. You just need to know how to control it. Feel the emotions, but understand how to react. So summary, sorry I took so long. Reframing what it means to be educated, along with where and how education happens. Taking initiative to engage with and give responsibility to our young men. They should be the ones who feel responsible for this masjid, for their community, for their household. They should be responsible for taking out the trash and doing the dishes. And if those things are not done, they should feel guilt for it. So instilling that in them from a young age, setting boundaries about access to destructive behaviors, specifically technology, helping them understand that this stuff is not good for them, and having a conversation with them about it, teaching them about it, not being afraid to discipline and teach what it means to be accountable. There needs to be consequences. I'll share one story if I have time at the end. And then instilling an Islamic worldview through the parents first and foremost. The parents need to be the role models for the children. If the parent isn't praying, the child is not going to pray. If the prayer isn't interacting with the parent, isn't interacting with the Quran, the child is not going to interact with the Quran. If the parent doesn't want to become a better person, the child will not want to become a better person. If the parent doesn't want to take care of the house, the child will not want to take care of the house. The list goes on. Be the example for your children. Okay. Sorry, once. The full length, but if there are any questions or comments, inshallah we can address them. If someone's upset with me, and you can chase me. You'll catch me. I can't run. I have a torn ACL. Okay. Oh yes. Okay. I'll have that question. Yeah, so one, it's a holistic approach, right? So we can't just focus on one thing, right? So there needs to be like this list here, right? Like we have to do all of them together. And it cannot just be one household doing it, but families have to come together to do it, right? So families need to have an agreement that these are my values. And so when our children come to your house and when your children come to my house, we're going to have these shared agreements and these shared values that we're going to hold each other accountable to. So that's the first step of coming to these agreements at a family or at a communal level, but then also having reasonable consequences. So the example that I was going to mention was, I had an incident with a student who was watching pornography on his phone. Okay, and so the parent said that we're going to remove this our kid's device so that they can no longer watch pornography. So the consequence was we're removing the device that they use to access pornography. Okay, a week goes by, right? Kid comes to me, he said, I'm like, how's it going? Are you still engaged with this? What's going on? He goes, yeah, I still watch. I was like, how? Like literally how? Your parents took away your device. Oh yeah, but they left the computer open in the hallway. So, okay, but it's in the hallway. How are you watching it in the hallway? Oh yeah, I mean, it's technically in the hallway, but it's kind of like in my room, so I can just close the door and then they don't see. So it's so silly, right? Like you took away the phone, but he still has access to a computer that he can access privately. Like why are we not taking the full measure to stop this? Like in this case, the child is actually seeking help, but he feels he's addicted, right? He's addicted and he still has access. So in that perspective, like it's the parents who are at fault because they don't understand what it means to restrict. They don't understand that, okay, yes, I've taken away his phone, but he still has access to a computer. If I take away his computer, he still has access to an iPad. If I take away his iPad, he still has access to his gaming device. If I take away his gaming device, when he goes to school, he can do it at school. So treating the symptom is not going to work. Right? Treating the symptom is not going to work. You have to learn how to remove the addiction, right? And removing addiction, it's a long process, and then you can come up with like goals for every single day. You need to have someone who's constantly involved in this person's life, checking in with them every single day, that in the morning you make a goal. Today, I am not going to watch pornography. Halfway through the day, today, I did not watch pornography. Throughout the rest of the night, I will not watch pornography. At night, before I go to sleep, I will not. And you have to constantly be involved with this person and then provide consequences. So if there's motivation to change, then you can provide consequences. What is it that you love, right? What is it that you enjoy? What is it that you want to do? That I'm going to take away. Right? So if someone loves to hang out with their friends on Saturday and they love to go play basketball with them, right? If you watch pornography this week, you don't get to go do that. So now I have something that I'm working towards, that I have a consequence that if I do this, I know that this is going to happen at the end of the day, right? So it's teaching accountability. Yeah, so I mean, it's getting younger and younger, right? So, I mean, now you have kids who are 9, 10, 11 who are watching this stuff online. And a lot of, unfortunately, kids don't know that they're watching this stuff, but they're seeing it. Right? So they don't even know that this is something I'm not supposed to be looking at, right? Because what? I don't know what they're looking at, and they don't know what they're looking at. So there's just complete ignorance across the board. Right? So we need to know what is being seen, and we need to know how to monitor and restrict it. So there's apps that you can put on the phone, there's monitoring things that you, but it has to also be instilled in the child. And that's going to take a very, very active role from a parent. Yeah, so that needs to be instilled at an early age, right? So if the child learns to trust their parents, right, up until the age of 7 and then past 7, right? So this goes a little bit into attachment theory. So it's a modern kind of spin on what we would call, like early psychology would call this like Freudian theory, but they have to like develop it to be like politically correct and things like that. So now it's presented as attachment theory, that the attachments that you create when you're a child are going to affect the type of relationships that you're going to have when you're growing up and when you're an adult. So they usually divide it into 4. So if someone is, for example, avoidant in their attachment style, right? They've learned that behavior from the interactions that they had with their parents or the interactions that they saw with their parent. So for example, something typical of this is a husband and a wife get in a fight, and let's say that the wife criticizes that the husband didn't do X thing correctly. What the husband does is he shuts off and says, okay, I'm not going to engage with my wife anymore. So he's avoiding the conflict, right? Instead of accepting responsibility and saying, you're right, I didn't do this correctly, let me see what I can do to fix it, and taking initiative, he's saying, I'm going to turn away from this problem and ignore it. So this is avoidant. So where did that come from? Right? He's not trained to do this, like what's going on? This is learned behavior that can be unlearned, right? So this is happening when the child is growing up, and say the child gets hurt and the parent's not there to take care of them, right? And the parent neglects the child, or the parent is not actively engaged in raising the child. And so the attachment that the child forms is no longer with a caregiver, but they don't have the ability to form an attachment, or they form an attachment with something like a toy or a video or something like that. So they learn to close themselves when they're distressed instead of seek help when they're distressed. And so then that carries out into adulthood. Right? So this has to start at a very, very young process, when the child is young. And then there's ways that you can work on it as they grow older. Time. Okay. Alhamdulillah, inshallah, I'll hang around for a little bit. If anyone wants to talk or yell at me, that's fine too. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you everyone so much for listening.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Alhamdulillah, we're so blessed to have with us Ustaz Zaid this evening. Alhamdulillah, thank you so much for a beautiful talk. If we can get everyone's help, please, if I can get everybody to grab 2 chairs and just stack them up neatly in the back so we can get the message clean for Fajr. Once again, if we can get everyone downstairs and upstairs, just grab 2 chairs, stack them up very neatly so that the place will be nice and neat for Salat al-Fajr in the morning. We greatly appreciate it. Jazakumullahu khairan. Also, we are about to lock up. So I know everybody wants to kind of socialize, but we do need to lock the place up so that we can go home and set the alarm, inshallah. So if everyone could please just start making your way out of the messages so that we can lock the place up and all go home. Thank you so much. Putting all this back. Oh. And what are you looking for?